and welcome to today's webinar on how to get paid faster with better invoicing in Construction Online. We appreciate you joining today. I'm Holly Gibson, VP of Growth here at UDA Technologies, and I'm joined by Carly Orlando, a Senior Success Coordinator on our Customer Success team.
Hello, everyone.
We're so excited to have you join today. For anyone who is new to Construction Online or maybe doesn't know as much about what we offer, Construction Online is our industry-leading project management and financial management platform designed specifically for the construction industry. So with Construction Online, our customers have access to tools to manage things like project financials, project schedules, communication, the project team, all sorts of things to keep the project running on track. Today, we're going to be focused specifically on an element of our financial management, which is the invoicing feature in Construction Online. So our big goals for today's webinar are to cover really just the overall workflow of invoicing, how to use invoices, what order to do things in. We'll go through how to actually build invoices, how to create those in Construction Online, as well as how to manage those once you have them created. And we'll also talk about the relationship between invoicing and other financial tools in Construction Online. So we'll discuss how to use invoicing with the OnCost Purchasing module, as well as how to use invoicing in Construction Online with your QuickBooks account. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. We're excited to really help you dive in and use invoicing in Construction Online.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, Holly. I think that invoicing is such a powerful tool in Construction Online. And I'm really excited because it's one of those things that when I talk about it with clients, they get really excited for how powerful it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can do so much. I guess, Carly, before we dive into how to make invoices, can you talk a little bit about just what an invoice is in Construction Online? Like, I think we all know what an invoice is. We want to create an invoice, we want to get paid. But in the context of Construction Online, what is an invoice?
Yeah, so invoices are formal requests to the owner of a project to receive payment for work completed or obligations that are determined in the contract that you send over to that owner. So basically, any incoming cash flow for your business.
That makes sense. And I think that's like a really important distinction to make as we dive into the invoicing feature here in Construction Online, because really, you can have invoices that you receive from others, like a subcontractor or a vendor, for example. And in Construction Online, those are entered as bills. So those invoices that you receive, that are your payables, those are going to be managed in the purchasing and expense management. Whereas what we're really covering today are invoices that you will create for your clients in order for you to receive payment. So how does invoicing really fit into that financial toolkit? Um, you know, how does everything fit together overall?
Yeah, so when we're considering the financial tools in Construction Online, we have our basic estimating where you can go in, you can start to put in values that you're getting from bids from subcontractors. You're able to go in and start building out proposals and generate those. Now, when it comes to invoicing and the purchasing tab, those are two features that kind of work side by side to manage the job costing flow. So when we're thinking of incoming revenue, that's all going to be managed through invoicing. Whereas the purchasing allows you to track purchase orders, bills, expenses, and receipts so you can easily track what is incoming into your company and outgoing. One common pain point I see, Holly, from customers who are just starting with any sort of project management software or construction management software is that they don't always know that they're in the red on a job until it comes to tax time. They don't have that live job costing view that gives them insight into what they're spending and what they're doing. So the invoicing and purchasing features work together to make sure you have that insight. I also think you brought up an important point. A common point of confusion I see is that confusion between what is a bill versus what is an invoice. And the easiest way to think about it is that invoice is incoming. If you can get that invoicing, incoming, they share the in, makes it easy. Bills are for anything that is leaving your company. So any money that you are letting go of or that you are sending out. So cash flow out.
That makes sense, and that's a good way to remember it. So it sounds like, and I love what you said about, the how this works in with job costing. I think we oftentimes think about job costing as managing those outgoing expenses. What are my estimate versus actuals? But really making sure that you're not in the red on a job. Part of that is of course staying under budget. Part of that is also just making sure that you are getting paid for everything that you should get paid for. And this part is really what's going to help people be able to do that. What do you see? I know you've helped so many of our customers implement these financial tools. What do you see as the key benefits of using invoicing and construction online? Like, what are your customers um, really seeing benefit wise when they put that in place?
Yeah, one really interesting thing I do see clients kind of approach invoicing as almost a formality, which is interesting because a huge part of running a construction business is making sure you're getting paid. But it's kind of almost gets to be an afterthought in a lot of people's brain. You get caught up in all of the project tracking, the
Mm-hmm.
scheduling, everything like that. And sometimes you can lose track of, what the main goal is. So invoices, the way you approach them can be game changing in terms of the way that your business is running. Invoices that are done well and created correctly can make sure that you're getting improved cash flow. They can act as professional documentation if you ever have to go back and look at a job. They can provide better transparency with clients, building a rapport there. What am I paying and why? Where are we at in the job? They can also lead to legal and contractual protection. Let's say for some reason a client doesn't pay their invoice on time. You have documentation of when they are paying those invoices, when they are being sent, when they're being created. So you get that better organization that can be really beneficial when it comes time for the most important part, which is getting paid.
That makes sense. Okay, so I know we want to go through today options for how to create the invoices and then really best practices for what to do once you have them created in the system. We have, though, made some changes. Construction Online has had an invoicing feature available to users for years, but this year we have made some enhancements, some changes to invoicing. What has changed on the invoicing side in Construction Online, and why does it matter?
Yeah, so we've been working on several improvements to the invoicing feature as a whole to accommodate different changes and growth that we're seeing in the construction industry. For example, there has been a large rise in the number of cost plus contracts that people are signing, not necessarily moving away from the fixed fee, but just opening up the door for more cost plus contracts and cost plus jobs. So, with that, we have created some abilities to go in and to create invoices directly from bills or expenses or receipts so that you can kind of go ahead and immediately turn around and bill your client as you are paying bills to your subcontractor. Additionally, we've also got some great things in, such as creating invoices from scratch. Maybe there are items in your estimate that aren't necessarily going to be lined up with your invoice. For example, I see people create invoices from scratch for deposits a lot or
Makes
for
sense.
collecting things like that. So, giving you a lot more power to control what you're invoicing and sending off to your client as well. Holly, I also know that you are on the development side a lot more than I am. Can you talk about some upcoming things that you see with the invoicing?
Yeah, sure. I get to work with our product team and our team of software engineers on, improvements for Construction Online overall. Probably the biggest thing that we have coming up for invoicing, and a lot of what you just mentioned, Carly, lays the groundwork for it, but we are currently working on adding in payment processing capabilities so that Construction Online users will be able to not only create their invoices, but go ahead and send them out for like a digital or online payment solution. So be able to do all of that right within Construction Online, have that money incoming. So we're really excited. We're really excited about that capability. I know it's one that several of probably you listening today have asked about. So that is coming up soon, and I think this is a great groundwork for being able to do that.
Great. Well, that's going to
So
be really exciting for my clients. I know I get that request a lot.
well, let's go ahead and jump into like, okay, we see why we want to work with invoicing, and it sounds like it's going to be really powerful. Where do we start? You know, if I'm going into Construction Online, I'm ready to start creating invoices. How do I decide which of these options to use, and how do we do it?
Yeah, so there are lots of different ways that you can go about and create invoices in Construction Online. You can create directly from your estimating spreadsheet, or if you have approved change orders that you want to go ahead and invoice from, you can create from those. Like we just talked about, you can also now do it from bills and expenses and receipts. So as you are creating bills and expenses or receipts through your purchasing tab, you will also be able to now go in and create invoices directly from that as well. You can also create invoices from scratch. What that means is that you are creating items in that invoice that are not accommodated for any of these three. So, any invoices that maybe are going to be for a deposit or aren't something that is specifically written out in your estimate, that is where that creating an invoice from scratch would be useful. I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can do it today, kind of starting with this creating an invoice from the estimate. So when you go to create from the estimate, it's going to pop up your modal, and this first screen is kind of your financial summary. So this is where you can see your total contract price, your approved change orders, and what's kind of been invoiced to date to give you some insight into that job costing before you start building the invoice itself. You can also go in and put in your invoice details. So who are you sending the invoice to? You can go ahead and title that invoice, add specific dates, terms, and notes and things like that as well.
And that's typically going to be the client. So when we look at bill to, that's usually going to be whoever the client is or whoever is going to be making the payment to you. Is that right?
Yes, that's whoever you're collecting payment from. Who you are sending this to is notice, hey, it's time for you to pay me.
Now, on the terms here, I notice here it says none. So we could just set a due date, or okay, I see. So we've got different options that we can set. So if I wanted all of my invoices to be net 15, I would just choose this option when I'm making them. Does that change the due date for me?
So if you were to click on that, it will update that due date for you.
Okay.
You can also customize those terms. So if you hit that little gear icon, you can set those to be due in a fixed number of days, due by a certain day of a month, or you can go in and do it however you would prefer to customize that for your convenience and your business's needs.
Nice. So like due by a certain day of the month. So maybe if I'm billing my clients, on the 30th of each month, I could set up something for that. But maybe for change orders, I want to do due upon receipt each time to go ahead and get those, knocked out or paid. So I like that flexibility. Now I have another question, Carly, on this screen. So I notice over where it says for company overhead and margin, because of course we want that profit to be built into the invoices and the payments that we're receiving. But this option looks to be grayed out. Why is that?
So, yes, normally you would be able to choose like insert company overhead and margin. You can either prorate it through the invoice or separate line items. I don't believe that I have any company overhead and margin in this job right now, so there's no way for me to really bill off of that. Mm-hmm. But normally you would be able to go through and prorate throughout the invoice or separate line items.
And then can you do that differently for each invoice, or does that need to be consistent throughout the project? I think one of the things that I noted when I was kind of working on invoicing in one of my own projects is that once you make one of those choices, it seems to lock that in for you. So you don't have to remember each time what you've chosen, and just really to keep those, to kind of keep the math calculating the way that it should. This will go ahead and I believe lock in for you throughout the course of that job.
You're exactly right on that, Holly. The reasoning behind that is because for most people, if you do not want to show the company overhead and margin each time, it would be kind of detrimental to accidentally go and show it at some point and can open the door for a lot of questions. So you want to make sure that with that company overhead and margin, it's staying consistent as you're invoicing. So that's why you would go ahead and see that be grayed out once you've made a decision.
Great. Now let's get some items added in here. So since we chose from estimate, are we going to just be able to pick off of our estimate what we're going to add? How does that part work?
Yeah, so when we go to the next step after we've inserted all of our details here, we can go over to this invoice item section. So there's a couple different ways that we can choose to invoice. Right here, you're going to see all of your different estimate items along with the total margins and invoice to date information. You can either do it as remaining total of all items, you can do a percentage of each line that you choose to select, or you can even do a custom amount if you prefer to have custom percentages for individual line items.
That makes sense. So if you were doing just a flat percent across the entire estimate, you could do that. Or if you needed to do more of like a progress bill based on like what had been done on the job, you could use that option that you're on here and just enter that in line by line as to what you wanted.
Right, and you can even go in, and if you do have items that are zero adjusted price or zero remaining, you can even go in and hide those so that you won't see those in your invoicing list to make that easier to filter through.
Perfect. So which option are we going to choose? So if we just wanted to do 10% of everything, we could just do that and it would calculate everything for us.
Yeah, so if I were to do 10% of each line, and I'm just going to include all rows, you'll see that right here in this invoice column, it's going to go ahead and just plug in that 10% for me. So then that invoice amount is going to reflect what 10% of those line items are.
Perfect. And then I noticed that it looks like we can, we've got good visibility here on like how much we've already invoiced for, what's remaining. So if we did need to adjust, I guess we could always use a different option, but we can at least see what those numbers are.
Yeah, and then another question I get when it comes to inserting custom amounts of each line, you can actually just select the line item in question and then type in a manual amount, or you can also type in a custom percentage. So if you were doing some sort of progress billing, you are not limited to just typing an invoice dollar amount. You can go in and split those percentages up accordingly.
Okay. So then what comes next if we get our amounts entered? So maybe we want to do 20% here. Okay, we've got a small invoice created. What's next? Do we just save it?
So next step is actually you can go in and add those from scratch items, even on an invoice that you are creating from an estimate. So when we were talking about from scratch invoices earlier, let's say you also wanted to go in and create one that wasn't on your line item, you can do that. Or if you needed to go in and choose like a specific subcontractor or something like that, you could do that as well. Type in a quantity and a unit cost, tax markup, and then go in for how much you are going to invoice. So now we can see that we have an additional item that we're invoicing for $1,000. Maybe that's a fee or an administrative error or something like that. You can always go in and accommodate for. If you also have attachments, so let's say you wanted to go in and show a couple progress photos or something like that, you could go in and do that as well.
And then once you've added anything you want to add, I'll just click create here. And now I see that I've got my invoice. So quick question to you. When I create this invoice, does that go ahead and send it to the client or do anything else with it, or what happens when we save it?
Yeah, so when you save the invoice, it's going to automatically go into your little dynamic table. Now, one thing I do want to point out here is that this dynamic table does give you a lot of information. So right here, you can go in and see like invoiced amounts, paid to dates, balances. You also have this payment status, so you can see when that payment is going to be due. And if it has been paid already, you can see that. Now you can also see right here, date emailed. Mine does not currently have a date emailed. You can always do that by right-clicking and emailing to choose either a summary invoice or a detailed invoice as well.
Okay, great. So I don't have to worry that like this automatically sent a bunch of things to my client. I'm still going to be in control of that. Now, I know we had a couple of other ways that invoices can get created. So we just made that one from our estimate. I know we can make them from change orders. We have a great question coming in about adding those additional lines or even making an invoice from scratch. Could we take a look at that option as well and just see how it works? So if we add from scratch, it looks like this first step here
Is the same.
is
They're
pretty much the
always the
same.
same for
Okay.
the first invoice details. Really, where you start to get into those differences is the invoice items. So, right here, when we're adding those items, this is pulling from my cost book, so I can go in and do that. Or if I had like specific line items in my estimate I did want to pull in, I can do it that way. But for the most part, this is going to be really convenient for me typing in something like deposit. So if I wanted to type in deposit and I wanted to bill $10,000, I can go in and create a bill called for a line item called deposit and hit next step.
Now, and the question is, where is that item? Is there an item list in the system somewhere that that could come from? And I notice here, like when we've added the deposit just kind of as a one-off, but I noticed this like drop down. So this is your cost book or list of items. So this is pulling from your company level cost book, and you can use this cost book to pull items into your estimate, to pull items in when you're creating change orders. And then you can also use that cost book to pull items, of course, into this invoice. So if you would click there, Carly, and just when you were searching a moment ago, I noticed some things coming up. So if we just wanted to search for uh, demo, for example, it looks like all of those are coming up. We could click on that and it would just put it right in the invoice. So that's another way to go with these from scratch options is like if you need to just type something out, you can, or if you want to pull that from your cost book or your items list, you can do that as well.
Yeah, and the great thing about doing this is that those cost books act as basically full pricing lists that you can import in Construction Online or build out. So it'll automatically import that unit cost for you. With that, you can go in and put different quantities. So if I know I actually need like 3 of a certain cost book item, I can go in and accommodate that, and those unit costs will be updated. So that would be a great way to go in and control some of those markups and things on those for scratch invoices.
Okay, sounds great. Okay. Now, I noticed one other kind of difference here is that markup. So that can
Right. So
be applied here.
if you wanted to go in and apply different types of markup, you could do it. You could do like percent, there's fixed amounts, or you could do it however really you want, and you would just go in and throw that in there.
Okay, gotcha.
Same concept too with invoices. Anytime you're creating a new invoice, be it from scratch, from estimate, however you're creating it, you will have the option to put in those attachments. So, for example, if you wanted to include in this deposit example a snippet of the contract that said, hey, this is your deposit or something, you could go ahead and include that as well. We can also go in and create those invoices from bills and expenses. And I think this is one of the new features that we've come out with recently. Holly, if you want to talk about a little bit about what made us inspired to add those bills and expenses and invoicing from it specifically.
Yeah, I mean, Carly, like you kind of hinted to this earlier, but we've definitely seen a little more request, mostly coming from folks who are Construction Online users doing primarily cost plus work or using cost plus contracts where they said, hey, it would really help us out if we were able to um, not only add in things like those bills and receipts and some of the things that we added in on cost purchasing, but almost as soon as the purchasing module came out, people started asking like, hey, can I create an invoice for my client from these expenses? And of course, that was not at the time an option when everything was brand new, but that is something that we've been working on. So we really did it to just continue to expand the flexibility that people have and to make sure that the invoicing in Construction Online does fit with different workflows, different contract types. So this, is especially useful for those doing cost plus contracts or really anyone who wants to invoice their client based on expenditures that they've had either just go out or that they're getting ready to pay out. And so with this, you have the option to create those client invoices from either bills or expenses and receipts that you have logged in the purchasing module for that project.
So just a quick side note on that, when we go to the purchasing module and we are in the bill section, there is an option to mark bills as billable. So if you right click on the bill and hit edit, you can go into the bill items and you can mark that as a billable bill and hit save on that. That will create the bill, make it billable so that when you go to create that invoice from that bill and expense, it would then populate in that where you could then pull that bill or expense. So here you can see I've got 3 billable bills or expenses and receipts. And you can go through if you've already fully invoiced one of those, you can hide those, or you can click which ones you want to create.
So here I'm noticing that like what you're mentioning here with that check mark, I'm also noticing there are columns here that will show me, especially for ones that might be partially invoiced to a client in the past. I can see how much, how many, what the total of that bill or expense is. I can see what the total billable amount is because that might be different if there's multiple line items in there, some billable, some not. Then we can see how much we've invoiced for this bill so far, what's remaining. And then I can also filter this down by date range. So I know a lot of people who had this request were really looking to do it based on a time frame. So our billing period, maybe runs for an entire calendar month. So maybe we want to pull just those bills and expenses for the month of August and then send a bill that's going to be, or create an invoice, send that to our client that's going to then be due, say, on September 15th or something like that. So it does give you a way to come in and look at those based on date, as well as have that visibility into, what's already perhaps been invoiced from that in case you're not doing it at 100% at a time.
Exactly. And when you go in, it's the same bill invoice details. So when you're creating those invoices, you can choose who to bill to. Same concept as the other ones. What's really going to look different here is the invoice items. You will now see this is going to include the bill items that are in each of these bills. So comparing that to the estimate table, when we invoice from the estimate, we are going to see the full estimate breakdown here. Whereas right now, what we're seeing in this items to include an invoice, this is specifically pulling in those items that are included in each bill in Construction Online to make it more focused on, hey, this is what's been billed so far. This is what we need to invoice off of. And same concept, you can do a remaining total of all the different lines, a percentage of each line, or a custom amount depending on what you need to do.
Exactly. So you do have that flexibility. For this type of invoice, generally it will be 100. Oftentimes it will be 100%, but you can make those adjustments. I'll also point out when you're comparing, Carly, this looks really similar to the one we created from the estimate. And part of that is a great highlight as to how all of these features work together. So this bill that we are creating the invoice from was created from the estimate. So or maybe even created from a purchase order. So we're able to create that PO or bill right off of the estimate using that estimate framework. We're able to then, in this step, create an invoice, and all of that structure is carrying over, which is really important when we're looking at things like reporting and job costing and even integrating with outside systems to keep everything consistent. And this just does such a great job of that. Now, I noticed for this one, there is a different next step. So we have a separate step here for markup. I guess this is the plus part of cost plus, right? So we've established our cost on the items we're including. Now we're going to be able to then mark that up here, it looks like.
Yeah, and one of the great benefits to that is that when it comes to progress billing or having a cost plus contract, usually there is some sort of accommodation made for overhead and markup on that contract that you sign with your client. So just because you are paying $10,000 for lumber does not necessarily mean your client is only reimbursing you for $10,000. you may go ahead and add a 5%, 10% markup to each line item. And this is where you really get that benefit with the invoicing and creating those invoices directly from the bill because you can see how that's going to benefit you profit wise as well.
Makes sense. And it looks like we've got some options, for the percent as well as if we wanted to do custom. There's also a don't apply markup option. We won't use that one. Here I've applied just a 15% markup across all of these, but we could customize if needed. And then we have our attachment step here, of course, as well. And we'll go ahead and just create that invoice.
Yeah, so other things that I do want to show when it comes to the invoicing is that you can go ahead and record payments on there. So while it's really important to go ahead and document, hey, I've gone ahead and sent an invoice to your client, you're going to want to, of course, get some payment from those clients as well. So when we're looking at an invoice, there is an option directly within the dynamic table to record payment. So when you click on that, you are creating a payment for that invoice. Again, you can do either a remaining total of all lines, percent of each line, or a custom amount of that line item. And Holly, I think this is where you were talking about payment processing as well. So that's something that would integrate with this feature.
Yeah, that's right. So, like right now, of course, when we receive the payment, we're just going to record those details using this form. And you can see that's super easy to do. You could write in how you got how you received the payment. You could make the adjustment to the amount. Hopefully, you're getting that 100% payment, but if not, you can always record differently. And then the new payment processing that we're working on, of course, is going to tie in. And instead of creating it this way, you would just be able to send that invoice out for payment once the client went online and paid it. This part would really be done for you and update the invoice as paid and record that in the system. So that'll be a huge, change coming soon, later this year, early 26.
Other things that I want to highlight on this dynamic table, Holly, because really this is one of my favorite changes that we've made to Construction Online in my time being here, is these dynamic tables are amazing when it comes to putting all the information out and being able to see it. One of the great things about the invoicing feature is that it is bidirectional with QuickBooks. So when we are creating the invoice itself, there is an option on the invoice to go ahead in this invoice details and send to QuickBooks. This is going to automatically generate an invoice copy over in QuickBooks. Just keep in mind that that invoice number, the reason you can't change it is because it has to be unique in order for QuickBooks to be able to process that invoice. So you can either do it from right here, send to QuickBooks, which will automatically generate a copy, or later, let's say if you wanted to go through and you noticed that if you hadn't been sent, you can just super easily hit that send to QuickBooks button and it would shoot all of those over to QuickBooks as quickly as possible and give you a nice hyperlink that you can click on that will take you to that invoice in QuickBooks.
Okay, perfect. So just depending on your workflow, you could do it when you made the invoice, or you could just go back and do it later.
Right, exactly. Other
Awesome.
things that are great with the invoicing are the different report options that we've been working on.
One quick question I had about, when you were showing with the QuickBooks, that made me think, okay, so we're sending it to the QuickBooks. Do we have to do anything special to send it to the estimate? Like where does this show up in relation to the actual estimate or budget?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're looking in the estimate, we can actually see those invoiced amounts on the invoiced column here. So if we scroll to the right, we have a couple different options. We have a to be invoiced column where we can see what still remains. But if we right click and do show hide columns, there is an invoiced column where we can see, hey, this is the total amount of invoices in Construction Online. We also have a QuickBooks invoiced column, so if we wanted to import the total value of invoices that are in QuickBooks for those same line items to cross-reference between the two systems, we can do that as well.
That is a nice cross-reference point. I notice here, so it looks like that it's filling in our invoicing dashboard. And then this invoicing column, one thing that I love to show people here is that when you're just looking at your estimate or budget in Construction Online, if you've got this invoicing column turned on, you can actually just click on any of these numbers and it'll go ahead and take you to that invoice, or if it's multiple invoices, it'll just bring up you can see that here. It just opens up in a new tab for me. If it's multiple invoices, it'll go ahead and just pop up a little pop-up window to show me like, hey, maybe there's 3 invoices and I can see which ones they are and shortcut to those. So it's really nice to have that link or connection between, kind of between what you're doing on the invoicing side and like having that come back and show in an estimate or budget.
Yeah, and this actually plays really well in with the reporting options for the estimate and the invoices as well. So when we're thinking about financial reports that you may want to run that are for invoicing, you have additional reports such as detailed versus summary reports where you can go in and see, hey, this is the detailed invoice that I might be sending my client versus my summary invoice. So different ways that you can show those invoices to the client themselves, as well as things like paid to date reports and estimate versus invoice. And I have a couple pulled up as examples. So if we look here, this is an example of a detailed invoice report where you can see that this was for an overdue. So it will give you a nice little watermark if that's overdue. But if it's not overdue, it won't pop up with any sort of watermark. Just a common question. But this some or detailed invoice will show you a breakdown of different categories, subcategories, line items, and you actually have quite a bit of control over the way this is going to be printed. So if you go to the detailed invoice, you can choose different columns to include, only showing certain rows, giving more detail on tax visibility and things like that.
I see. So if I'm not doing a ton on the tax side and I don't want all that to show, I can just choose the other option that won't show up. Or maybe I'm worried about confusion if we do like all of the items and I just want to show subcategories, for example. I mean, it looks like there's just a lot of different ways that I could go depending on what my clients need. Now, what does the summary invoice do? Is that similar here, or does it really remove most of that detail?
So when we run a summary report, we can still run things like a basic tax breakdown, but for the most part, this is just to give them a notification of what they need to pay. So whereas a detailed invoice kind of comparing the two, we can really show a lot of the price breakdown. The summary is going to be more of, hey, this is just what you need to be paid. So depending on your business's needs and how much information you want to show the client, you are capable of going in and putting in those different variables for your client to based on the level of transparency you want.
That makes sense. And then when we send this to the client, we can email it out of Construction Online, or we can just download it. It looks like it's just generating a report or PDF. So super, flexible as far as that goes. What are some other reports that you see people using pretty frequently with the invoicing tool?
Yeah, so with the invoicing tool, you do have several financial reports. We have a whole section for it. And some of the most common reports that I see for people running when they are working with invoicing is they will run things like the estimate versus invoiced report. That compares invoiced amounts against your estimated costs. So an example of that estimate versus invoiced report is you can see the breakdown of your categories and subcategories, what the total price was, what you've invoiced so far, and the remaining balance. Other financial reports I see really commonly are the paid to date report. It's going to show all payments for estimate selections and change orders. So that's going to break it down by each section in the estimate and show you what has been paid to date so far by the client.
I see. Which is a nice, I see people using this as like a way to just update their clients, like run a report and be able to hand that off to their customers. Now, it looks like, here, a couple of quick questions, I guess, about using invoices with clients, and then just sort of the management process in general. So when it comes to clients, we've talked about being able to email this. Does this show up in the client portal? So if someone is using Client Link as a way to provide a login for their clients, will the invoices show there? Is that an option to be turned on or off? How does that work as far as just sharing?
So if you are looking at the client link settings, when you scroll down, to the financial sections, there is a section for invoicing to show them their project invoices. Now you have a little bit of control over what that includes. So if you want the clients to only see invoices that have been billed directly to them, you can do it that way. Or if you only want them to see the basic invoice like itself, no details, you can go in and get that control. But yes, you do have the ability to go in and show them those project invoices with some level of variations in your permissions
Yeah.
in the client link portal itself.
Well, that's nice. So, I mean, we don't have to show them that way, but if we wanted the clients to have more of just like a direct way to log in, see them, it looks like it's really easy to turn that on.
Yeah, and another thing that I'll see people do is if you don't want necessarily to go in and show those, or you only want to just run the PDF, you don't have to share that invoicing. I will see people occasionally create like a file folder in their folders for summary or detailed invoices, and they'll just keep all of the PDFs there and then just share that folder with the client so they can cross reference any invoices on their end if you don't want to share more of that invoicing feature.
Okay, gotcha. Now we did have, and we're getting a ton of questions. We will try to get through as many of them as we can. I don't know if we'll be able to hit on all of them, but one question that came in, I want to go ahead and touch on before we move on, is just a question about, okay, how can you just show a total on the invoice, just that column? So if I go into print here and just do like a summary, we can really, get rid of the tax breakdown. We could add any text to it if we wanted to have like some contract terms and create that. And that's really going to just be just the total. Now, there are some other variations when I'm reading the question, how can the invoice show only a total one column with that total? So if you wanted more of like a detailed view with the items listed, but not to show as many columns, you can adjust that column visibility when you're creating the detailed invoice here. So you can kind of choose to show, get rid of markup, get rid of this, we can really just get rid of the percentage, the paid to date, the price, and just leave only the total remaining for that invoice. And then, maybe we only want to do subcategory or something like that. So you can adjust the detail and end up with an invoice, and we'll hide that tax info. So then you can end up with, it's really two columns, but essentially it's just really saying, okay, here is just what's due. So it's getting rid of, any of that extra quantity or markup or tax info that might be shown on the other columns, and giving a little bit more of a focused view on just what needs to be paid. Now, Carly, one question that I see, and I've seen a couple of people ask here, and I know it was on our list to cover today as well. Is we're looking here at an individual project, but what of course, a lot of businesses will have multiple jobs running at the same time. Maybe there's somebody on their team that's really in charge of the financials across the board, more at a company level. Is there a place where they can see invoices for all the jobs in one place, or to kind of see those by group, or to see different options for that financial management?
Absolutely. So if you go to the company overview, there is a section where you can go and see all of those various invoices at once. So this is going to allow you to see every invoice across every job, where you can go in, see what's overdue, when they were emailed, how much has been paid so far. And you can even go in and see various payments that have been made as well. So you get that company level view. You can also go in and filter. So if you wanted to filter by that date range, like we discussed, Holly,
Okay.
you could go in and do that. You could go and filter just to see which ones are overdue. So you have quite a bit of control over what this company view looks like as well.
Nice. And I think here, these are little shortcuts to some of those filters. So if we just wanted to see overdue really quickly, like as a toggle on off filter, we could do that. Hopefully, of course, you won't have quite as many overdue as we're seeing here in our account. But the idea is to bring visibility. When we talked about uh, as the webinar was starting, I know one of the things that we see as a benefit is, and a goal really for us, is to help you be able to get paid faster. And so part of that is just visibility. If you can have somewhere that can go to really quickly see what invoices do we have open, or show me everything that's overdue, that allows you to then take action on that immediately, as opposed to just catching that down the road when you happen to be looking at that job or happen to be kind of running a different financial report.
And one thing I will see is, it's also a great way to detect pain points. If you do end up having 19 overdue invoices, maybe that's a sign that that's a place that we can work on some improvement, or maybe we can update our contract terms to add like additional fees, late fees for payments, or things like that, to make sure that in the future, when you're running future jobs, you run into those problems less. So it can also be a great diagnostic tool to help you find areas of improvement within your company.
That's really insightful. Yeah, I think that it could be.
So, Holly, do you want to talk little bit about invoicing and what plans it's included in and things like that?
Sure. So, one thing with invoicing is that it is included. Like if you are using a construction online account, residential, commercial, specialty, um, you will have access to create invoices in Construction Online. So that invoicing feature is available at those different levels. Now, certain things that we have looked at today, for example, the ability to create an invoice from bills, expenses, and receipts, that is only available for our team level accounts and above, primarily because those are the only account levels that actually do have the purchasing module for creating the bills, expenses, and receipts. So you just would need to have that other module in place in your account in order to be able to do that. So it's one of those great tools, though, that really everyone does have access to across the different versions of Construction Online. Um, because again, like our goal is your success. So we want you to be able to create these invoices and get paid for your work. And so that's a great way to be able to do that. If you currently do not have a Construction Online account, you're looking at, where's going to be the best place to get started from an invoicing perspective, you really can't go wrong. But of course, we're also just happy to talk to you and walk through what those different versions or tiers are, and kind of look at other things that you might need. But you're going to be covered no matter which way you go.
Well, that's great to hear. And I think that that's really beneficial for everyone because, again, the point is to hopefully get paid.
Definitely. So let's see. We do have a couple of questions that we'll just try to touch on. We have a little bit of time left. Some of these are pretty specific. So if we don't get to your question, just know it's probably because we want to just reach out to you personally and ask a few follow-up questions or something like that. But a couple of people have kind of asked questions about the integration with QuickBooks. Carly, I know you've covered a few best practices. Some of these relate to the version of QuickBooks. So we were just talking about like which version of Construction Online do you need? From the QuickBooks perspective, what version do they need in order to integrate with the invoicing here?
So if you are using QuickBooks Desktop, typically you will need a team account or above for that socket integration. Now, the invoicing feature in Construction Online does not directly integrate with QuickBooks Desktop. The reasoning is that QuickBooks Desktop is a desktop-based program. So everything is held locally. All of your data with QuickBooks Desktop is held locally on your hard drive and your device. So you do have to have a middleman. So most of that will actually be done through our partner software to Construction Online, Socket, which allows you to go in and upload information from QuickBooks into Construction Online or download back into QuickBooks Desktop information from Construction Online. So you'll use less the invoicing feature in that situation and more of Socket.
I see. Now, if you did want to use the invoicing feature, you could. It's just not going to automatically send these invoices through the integration to a QuickBooks Desktop account. You would just recreate those invoices, on the QuickBooks side. Now, with QuickBooks Online, it is a different story. So with that, the integration really continues to expand. And of course, we see Intuit continue to expand those capabilities on the QuickBooks side for QuickBooks Online. And so with that, you do have some of these options that we were looking at. So really to take advantage of all of the integration with QuickBooks from an invoicing perspective, QuickBooks Online is going to be the way to go, or give you um, the most integration capabilities, as far as being able to, for example, create an invoice, send that directly to QuickBooks Online, create a payment in Construction Online invoicing, and send that directly to QuickBooks Online. So you will have a more direct integration path using QuickBooks Online, but you can do, of course, some integrations with QuickBooks Desktop via Socket. So great question there. Let's see, we also have kind of a question about some other future plans. So someone wants to know if if these invoices, if you can use them to generate like a application for payment in order to bill the customers. So they prefer like a application for payment type of layout. So as of right now, you do not have like that pay app format that you can generate from these invoices. You can generate that um, through Socket if you are using like a QuickBooks Desktop integration with Construction Online invoicing. That is not yet available. It is something that's on our roadmap, so it's not currently underway, so I wouldn't have very much information on that, but it is on our roadmap, something that we do, plan to do, and we'll, of course, continue to keep you guys updated and posted on any timelines. But it's definitely pretty bright on our radar. Something that we'll be implementing in the future there. Well, I think, Carly, that really covers everything that we wanted to touch on today as far as the high points. What should people do if they, watch this webinar? They're like, great, I really do want to get started, maybe doing some different things on my invoicing, or perhaps someone's just not using it yet, but they're like, this looks great, I want to start using invoicing and Construction Online. What do you recommend that they do next? And will they be able to watch this training again?
Yes, so the webinar recording will be made available and it will be sent to everyone who did register for the webinar, so you can expect that link. Usually it takes around at least 24 hours, I think, is usually the average for making sure that webinar gets processed. So if you don't get it immediately, don't panic. We will get that out to you as soon as we can. Just take some time to process on our side. Additionally, if you do have questions, we have a ton of help resources available to you. There is a little red help button in Construction Online. We have help and support. We do have some phone numbers and things like that where you can go in and access our live chat, our knowledge base. You can schedule training, email our support staff, or use phone support. Our available times are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, but you are welcome to call in during any of those hours for additional support, or use our live chat and get in touch with the representative almost immediately. Additionally, we also have a YouTube channel, and that YouTube channel does have some videos on invoicing right now, and we are constantly working to expand that YouTube channel. So you're welcome to reach out to us directly, check out our knowledge base. We have tons of invoicing articles, and we have a bunch of YouTube videos, so you have a ton of ways to get help if you need it.
Well, that sounds great. Sounds like a lot of great options for taking the next step. So I think that wraps us up for today. Again, we did want to just thank everyone for taking some time out of your workday to join us and learn more about how to use Construction Online. You can always visit our website, constructiononline.com, for information on upcoming webinars. We have 2 great sessions coming up in September that are going to focus in on using scheduling. But until then, we hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for joining.